In the spring of 2019, East Detroit was alive with the usual rhythms of the city. The corner gas station stayed open late, music pulsed from cars that cruised through neighborhoods, and small groups of young people found places to gather on weekends. Among them was a tight-knit group of friends in their late teens and early 20s. For them, it was a chance to escape the struggles of everyday life, to laugh, to party, and to live openly and freely in ways that weren't always possible in their daily lives. On the night of May 25, 2019, that escape turned into a nightmare. A night of joy and noise dissolved into chaos and bloodshed when a man in a mask stepped through the door of their party house and opened fire. Within seconds, 3 young lives were cut short, and the survivors were left not only injured, but scarred by what they witnessed. The killing shocked Detroit, and the investigation that followed revealed a chilling motive rooted in secrecy, shame, and hatred. That Friday evening had begun like so many others. The group gathered at a modest house on Devonshire Road, a place under construction but open enough to host the night's events. The crowd started larger, with drinks being poured, music echoing through the rooms, and laughter spilling into the street. Over the hours, some people came and went. There were hookups, arguments, and jokes shouted across the house. By the time the night settled into the early morning hours, only 5 people remained inside: Blair Keys, Paris Cameron, Alante Davis, Armin Matthews, and Timothy Blanchard. They were tired, buzzing from alcohol and adrenaline, winding down among the clutter of bottles and construction dust. The mood had shifted to something calm, intimate, and relaxed. But then came the sound sharp cracks at the front door. At first, some thought it was fireworks. After all, it wasn't unusual in Detroit for late-night celebrations to spill into the streets. But the sound was too close, too sharp, and too menacing. The door burst open. A figure in a ski mask stormed in, his eyes the only visible feature. In his hand was a gun, already raised. Without hesitation, he began firing into the group. The living room erupted into chaos. Blair sprinted to the bathroom, slamming the door and diving behind it as bullets ripped through the air. He later remembered counting more than 20 shots while trembling and hiding, each one echoing like a death sentence. In the living room, his friends screamed, fell, and bled. Armand, who had been in the basement, felt the impact of a bullet to his chest, but pushed through the shock and pain. He rushed toward his friend Timothy, who had collapsed, riddled with gunfire. Despite his wound, Armand tried to apply pressure, begging Timothy to hold on, calling out for help. Above him, Blair listened in terror, waiting for the storm to end. When the shooting finally stopped, silence returned. Blair pushed the bathroom door open. The scene was a nightmare. Paris and Alante lay on the living room floor, blood pooling beneath them. Timothy was slipping away despite Armand's desperate attempts. 2 frantic 911 calls were placed almost simultaneously. Blair's voice shook as he begged dispatchers for help. "Please, please. 2 of my friends are fatally wounded. Please, hurry. They've been shot. Please." From another room, Armand's voice came through as well, urgent and panicked, his chest wound making it hard to breathe. "They just came in and shot my friends. Please, please, send somebody now." The chaos of their words captured the horror of the scene. But by the time emergency responders arrived, it was already too late for some. Alante was pronounced dead at the scene. Timothy died shortly after, despite Armand's efforts. Paris, though alive when medics arrived, had been struck 4 times. She was rushed to the hospital, placed on life support so her organs could be donated, but her injuries were unsurvivable. She died not long after. The weight of the loss crushed everyone who knew them. Paris Cameron was only 20 years old. She had bravely come out as gay at 13, and just a year before had begun living openly as a transgender woman. She was vibrant, social, and unafraid to live authentically. Her friends admired her courage, her style, her energy. Timothy Miami Blanchard, also 20, was remembered for his fun-loving nature and loyalty to family. He had a close bond with his brother, who later described Timothy as someone who lit up every room. And 21-year-old Alante Tay Davis was the kind of young man who was always ready to make others laugh. His sister said he was silly, full of life, always helpful to those around him. In a matter of minutes, 3 bright futures were erased. Armand and Blair were the only survivors from the house. Both were traumatized, both physically and emotionally scarred. Blair would later say he could still hear the gunshots when he closed his eyes, and the sight of his friends' lifeless bodies haunted him. The investigation into who was behind the massacre began immediately. But despite the shooter being masked, suspicion quickly formed. The survivors recalled an encounter earlier in the night at a local BP gas station. It was around 2:40 a.m. when Paris and Alante entered the store, dressed casually, picking up drinks. Blair and Timothy soon followed. Behind them in line was a young man Paris noticed. She struck up a conversation, her natural charisma on display even in that small moment. The cameras didn't capture the words, but they showed Paris leaning toward him, smiling, and later calling after him as he left. Blair remembered Paris being overtly flirtatious, clearly intrigued. Before long, Paris extended an invitation. There was a party happening nearby and he should come. She even called out the address as Blair's car pulled away. That young man was 18-year-old Devin Robinson. He lived just 2 blocks away. And not long after, he showed up at the Devonshire Roadhouse. At first, Devin kept to himself, quiet and observant. But within minutes, he was upstairs in the master bedroom with Paris. Later, others joined in. What happened wasn't hidden. In fact, it became part of the party chatter. Jokes were made openly, teasing Devin as trade, a slang term used for men who presented as straight but secretly sought intimacy with other men. In that moment, the group laughed, carefree, unaware of the danger simmering beneath the surface. Devin may have smiled or said little in return, but something inside him was breaking. He was on the down low, hiding his sexuality from his family and community. That night, in the haze of alcohol and reckless fun, he may have felt exposed, mocked, or ashamed. And that shame festered into rage. By 4 a.m., cameras captured Devin outside again, pacing, spitting, even gagging on the sidewalk near the gas station. He bought another drink, looking unsettled, and then returned home. Less than an hour later, he reappeared at the house, but this time wearing a ski mask and carrying a gun. Police tracked his movements through surveillance footage, piecing together a chilling timeline. The gas station encounter, the brief party appearance, the return home, and the re-emergence at the crime scene. When they went to his house the next day, they found it empty. Devin and his mother had abruptly moved out, packing their belongings overnight. For days, he was nowhere to be found. His photo was released to the media, his name circulating as a wanted man. Finally, a tip led police to the other side of Detroit. Devin Robinson was arrested. During interrogation, detectives confronted him directly. They told him they knew everything, that his DNA was at the scene, that they understood what happened, that they even sympathized. They said they knew he was closeted, that the jokes at the party must have pushed him over the edge. One detective leaned in and said, "We know exactly what you did, but we want to know why. What was your emotional state? Because if you tell us, we can help you. We're men too, we understand." Devin sat quietly, denying the killings but admitting part of the truth. He confessed he had been with Paris in the bedroom. He admitted he was gay but had never told anyone, not even his family. His voice dropped as he whispered, "Nobody knows. Not even my mom. Nobody. And I don't want them to find out." But he stopped short of admitting to the murders. Still, the evidence was overwhelming. Witnesses placed him at the house. Surveillance tracked his movements. And while his DNA wasn't everywhere as police had bluffed, it was found on one of the victims. The prosecution's case was clear. Devin Robinson had lashed out in a violent act of rage and shame, executing 3 young people who had done nothing but live their truth. The trial was harrowing. Survivors Blair and Armin relived the horror in their testimonies, recounting the sound of the shots, the sight of their friends dying before their eyes. The families of Paris, Timothy, and Alante sat in the courtroom, their grief raw, listening to every detail. In June 2020, Devin Robinson was found guilty of 3 counts of murder, along with other charges related to the shooting. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the families, the verdict brought some measure of justice, but no closure. Their children, their siblings, their friends were gone forever. Paris would never continue her journey as a proud transgender woman. Timothy would never laugh with his brother again. Alante would never crack another joke. The tragedy highlighted not only the devastating consequences of one man's secret and shame, but also the vulnerability of young LGBTQ+ people who dared to live openly in a world that wasn't always safe. What happened on Devonshire Road was more than a crime. It was an act of hate, fueled by fear and silence, and it left a permanent scar on the community. And so, what began as a night of laughter and music in East Detroit ended in horror, a reminder of how quickly joy can turn to tragedy, and how dangerous hidden secrets can become when mixed with violence. The morning after the shootings, investigators meticulously reconstructed the events of that night, focusing on every movement and decision made by Devin Robinson. Surveillance footage from multiple locations became the cornerstone of the investigation, capturing critical moments that pieced together an unbroken timeline. At 4:53 a.m., a dark figure emerged from Devin's home on Buckingham Street, moving swiftly toward Devonshire Road. Minutes later, another camera captured a blurred figure running from the house where the party had occurred, moments after the shots rang out. The proximity of the 2 locations, less than a quarter-mile apart, made it clear that someone had left one home, committed a violent attack, and returned in an alarmingly short span of time. Law enforcement immediately focused on Devin as the prime suspect, yet he maintained a calm exterior, insisting he had been at home the entire time. During interrogation, Devin attempted to deflect, claiming lapses in memory and confusion over the timeline. Detectives pressed him relentlessly, pointing out the precise alignment of surveillance footage showing someone leaving his house, committing the shooting, and returning minutes later. Devin's denials were inconsistent, and his anxiety grew as his personal life became a focus. He revealed that he was a closeted gay man, fearful of how his family might react if they discovered his sexuality. This fear, combined with alcohol and the social pressures of the party, became a key point for investigators seeking to understand the motive. The detectives probed whether this fear could have triggered a rash, violent decision, but Devin remained mostly silent, unwilling to admit any involvement in the killings. His mother, Mallory, became a figure of both support and frustration in the case. She expressed anger over media speculation portraying her son as a hate-driven murderer, emphasizing that his sexual orientation was irrelevant to the events. She argued that framing the shooting as a hate crime misrepresented the situation entirely. Meanwhile, police concentrated on the hard evidence: the camera footage, eyewitness statements, and forensic analysis of the crime scene. Every angle, every timestamp, and every captured motion was carefully scrutinized, leaving little room for ambiguity. The footage, when compared with witness accounts, painted a chillingly precise timeline, showing that the shooter had moved deliberately, with knowledge of the house layout and the victims' positions. The courtroom drama intensified as the prosecution laid out their case in vivid detail. Blair Keys and Armin Matthews, both present during the shootings, provided testimony critical to linking Devin to the crime. Blair recounted the terror of seeing a masked figure enter the house and open fire indiscriminately. Armin described how he grabbed Timothy, guiding him to the basement, while the gunman fired into the living room. Although Armand did not see the shooter's face, Blair's testimony filled in those gaps, describing the masked figure with precise attention to height, build, and movements. The prosecution emphasized that the attack was deliberate, executed with knowledge of the victims' locations, leaving no doubt that the shooter acted with lethal intent. The survivors' accounts highlighted both the chaos and the split-second choices required to survive. Blair hid in the bathroom, listening to over 20 gunshots reverberate through the house. When he emerged, he found his friends Paris Cameron and Alante Davis gravely wounded. Armand's instinct to provide immediate first aid was heroic, but insufficient to save Timothy and Paris. Their stories conveyed the terror, confusion, and urgency of the moment, revealing the harrowing experience of living through an unpredictable, violent attack. The jury heard every detail of these accounts, understanding how quickly the situation escalated from a house party to a deadly scene of carnage. The prosecution also highlighted Devon's prior interactions with the victims, focusing on the party's social dynamics. Paris had invited Devon to the house after their encounter at a nearby gas station, and he had briefly engaged in intimate activity in the master bedroom with her and others. While the defense sought to portray these events as ordinary party interactions, the prosecution argued that they provided crucial context for his emotional state and possible motive. Blair expressed concern about bringing a stranger into the house, a concern that ultimately underscored the danger of Devon's presence. The prosecution framed these social dynamics as the backdrop against which a calculated act of violence occurred, blending social anxiety, fear, and impulsivity. Forensic evidence further corroborated the prosecution's case. Though the firearm was never recovered, bullet trajectories, entry points, and wound locations aligned with the survivors' accounts. Bloodstains and other traces indicated that the shooter had moved deliberately through the house, targeting individuals with lethal precision. Investigators noted that no alternative suspect could account for the meticulous alignment of movements captured on camera. The circumstantial evidence, when paired with eyewitness testimony, created a compelling narrative of premeditated action, leaving little room for doubt about Devon's involvement. Identification of Devon as the shooter became a key turning point in the trial. Blair initially struggled to make a positive identification under the stress of the shooting, but upon review and reflection, he confirmed that the masked figure who had entered the house and opened fire was indeed Devon Robinson. Armand corroborated aspects of this, describing how he moved with Timothy to safety while observing shadows and movements, even if he did not directly see the shooter's face. The jury was presented with a comprehensive reconstruction of the crime, linking the surveillance footage, eyewitness accounts, and physical evidence to a single individual whose actions led to the deaths of 3 young people. The trial delved into the psychology of Devon, exploring the pressures and fears that may have influenced his behavior. While the defense argued that he was a young man overwhelmed by fear, intoxication, and social embarrassment, the prosecution highlighted the calculated nature of his actions. Surveillance footage showed him leaving his home, traveling to the party, carrying out the attack, and returning home, all within a tight time frame. There was no credible alternative explanation for his presence at the scene or the movements captured on camera. The prosecution argued that these actions were deliberate, executed with an understanding of consequences and lethal intent. As the proceedings concluded, the jury weighed the substantial body of evidence, including survivor testimony, forensic findings, and surveillance records. The social context of the party, Devon's interactions with Paris, and his movements before and after the shooting created a coherent narrative of responsibility. The jury deliberated extensively, considering both the evidence and the arguments surrounding motive and intent. Ultimately, the jury found Devon guilty on all counts: 3 counts of first-degree premeditated murder, 2 counts of assault with intent to murder, and multiple firearm-related felonies. The sentences reflected the severity of the crime, with 3 consecutive life terms without parole, accompanied by additional consecutive terms for other charges. signaling the court's acknowledgement of the gravity of his actions. The aftermath of the verdict focused on the lives lost and the community's response. Families and friends of Paris Cameron, Alante Davis, and Timothy Blanchard continued to honor their memories, remembering their personalities, joy, and the unfulfilled potential of their lives. Survivors spoke publicly about the trauma they endured and the bravery required to survive the attack. Devon's appeals, largely focused on identification evidence, were unsuccessful, cementing his responsibility and the court's affirmation of justice. His incarceration remains for decades, reflecting both the legal consequences and the societal imperative to address such acts of calculated violence. In closing, the East Detroit house party shooting was a devastating example of the lethal intersection of fear, secrecy, and opportunity. The events unfolded with terrifying speed, leaving a trail of evidence, survivor testimony, and community grief. The judicial process brought a measure of justice, but the emotional scars remain. Families continue to honor the memories of Paris, Alante, and Timothy, reflecting on the tragedy and the lessons it imparts. This case stands as a stark reminder of the fragility of life, the unpredictable consequences of human decisions, and the long-lasting impact of one fateful night gone irreversibly wrong. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed diving into this case and want to explore more true crime stories, don't forget to subscribe to Into the Crime Depths. Make sure to hit the like button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. See you in the next case.